Welcome to my ultimate Kiriko guide. I'm Tephrite, a top 500 support main who plays a ton of Kiriko. On top of my knowledge and experience, I have scoured the internet for Kiri guides to bring you the best guide possible. This video will be timestamps, so if you want to skip ahead to specific parts, feel free, but I highly recommend watching all the way through. If you think I've missed something or have any questions, I stream on Twitch almost every day and I'll be happy to help. With that, let's jump into the game settings. If you didn't already know, each hero has their own specific settings. If you head over to Kiriko's, the first thing I'd suggest is turning off toggle Ofudas. By default, when you press your primary fire once, it'll cost all of Kiriko's Ofudas. Turning this setting off means that you now have to hold down your primary fire to heal. Letting go will stop the animation. This is ideal because some players might not need all of your heals, and having this setting off allows you to swap the damage a lot quicker in case a flanker jumps you, or you see a kill that you can quickly finish off. Next is setting Swift Step sensitivity to 100%. In 9 out of 10 cases, you're going to be using Swift Step to get yourself out of sticky situations. Turning this setting up makes it easier to Swift Step without needing to be 100% accurate, so you'll be more likely to get off this ability when flanking or under pressure. Finally, I'd also recommend binding Swift Step to mouse wheel down if you're playing on PC. Not only will this make your Swift Step cost instantly after being stunned, but I also just find this more comfortable than spamming shift. An optional setting would be to swap your primary and secondary fire keybinds. I didn't used to do this previously, but I've recently tried it out and it seems pretty great. Now let's head on over to Kiriko's healing. Her Ofudas, which are single target projectile heals, which unfortunately in Season 9 is one of the reasons why Baptiste and sometimes Moira are seen as better picks. These supports can weave in damage whilst healing a lot better than Kiriko. However, we will get into the Kirithm, which does a bit of this later on. Kiri can throw two types of Ofudas, blue and yellow. The blue ones are just trailing projectiles, so if anyone walks in front of them, they will receive healing. The yellow ones, however, are locked onto a specific target and will follow their movement. If you're wondering if you're in range of locking onto your target, the Swift Step graphic is a great indicator. However, keep in mind that if the player you're healing moves around a sharp corner, the Ofudas might end up traveling into the wall and thus not healing them. As previously mentioned, her Ofudas are projectiles, so this means that they cannot travel through shields and can also be eaten by D.Va's Matrix. Since they do have a travel time, you can preemptively send Ofudas to a flanker who's about to enter a fight, giving them a higher effective HP, as the Ofudas will heal them as soon as they take damage, provided you time this correctly. However, if you're just starting out on Kiri, I wouldn't worry about this right now. Next up is her Kunai, which is the way Kiri does damage. As I mentioned earlier, if aiming feels a bit weird with her, try swap the left and right mouse button and see how it feels. Kiri's kunais are the only weapon in the game that has a 3x multiplier on them. Because of this, it is extremely important to aim and spam kunais at head height to fully take advantage of this. In addition, Kiri's shield damage is extremely low, so don't waste your time shooting shields. Instead, try to get off angles to create pressure or get picks. When it comes to hitting your shots, I also recommend trying not to jump as much, as it'll make it easier to aim. I do also suggest a flicking aim style instead of tracking for your kunais, but do whatever works for you. If you need any help practicing your aim, a lot of players, myself included, use the custom game VAXTA to warm up. I definitely recommend it. If your team is taking a lot of damage, you can abuse the Kirithm, which I mentioned earlier. When spam healing, you can also weave in one kunai in between bursts without sacrificing any heals. You can take this one step further and weave in two kunais, which adds a slight delay to your heal, but it's still really good. Unfortunately, in Season 9, Kiri can no longer 2-tap most DPS. Sag. She can still 2-tap Widow and Tracer, but most other DPS now also require a melee on top of this, which can also act as an animation cancel to your kunai. Now we are on to arguably the most valuable ability in the game, Suzu. Suzu cleanses all negative effects on the target affected by it, as well as giving a burst heal and some invulnerability frames. Before heading into a fight, have a look at the enemy team. What abilities or ults can you negate with this? Do they have an Ana that might land a fat anti-nade on your helpless Roadhog? Do they have a Rein who can land a 5-man shatter? Always keep these at the back of your mind so you can use your Suzu to completely nullify these effects. On the flip side, it could also be used to secure kills, like Suzuing your ulting Reaper. Try your best to save it for these abilities. However, with the new DPS passive, you're going to need to use it a lot more than before, purely for the burst healing it provides. Before you throw it, try to judge if the player will die without it. Obviously this comes with experience, but here are some things to look out for. Can the player cleanse or save themselves? For example, Zarya Bubble or Reaper Wraith? Look at where they're positioned. Are they in cover or out of reach of the enemy? If your teammate gets anti-naded and immediately backs up into cover away from the enemy, then there's no need to waste Suzu, and you now have an opportunity to use it aggressively instead. Some ults are a bit trickier to Suzu than others. One tip I'll give to countering Sigma Flux is to either throw it at the wall next to you if you're caught in it, or try to time it with them landing and aim it at the ground. Throwing it at a teammate in the air can work, but it's a lot harder to hit. There's also a great workshop map called NVMEE if you want to practice these scenarios. Final thing to keep in mind, similarly to your Ofuda heals, it is a projectile, so D.Va's Matrix can eat it. Now let's move on to the ability that makes her the most versatile, her Swift Step. Like I mentioned earlier, Swift Step more often than not is to get you out of sticky situations. Don't waste it, especially if they have heroes that can punish you, like Winston or Genji. If you can get to the fight without using Swift Step, then don't. If you need to get to high ground, use your wall climb instead. Most of the time, you'll find taking an off angle is beneficial to your team anyways. You can use it to reposition during fights and save teammates, but only if you can guarantee making it out alive. Do not TP into that suiciding Ryan. A 4v5 is winnable, but a 3v5 is probably not. Swift Step also works as a self-cleanse. If you're hit by things like Dynamite, Pulse Bomb, Echo Stickies, you can cleanse yourself by TPing to a teammate. If you can TP to a safe spot, I would recommend doing this instead of wasting your Suzu on yourself, as this allows you to save it for your team and even yourself later on. Swift Step also has a cost time, so keep that in mind when timing your TP out of things like May Blizzard or Diva Bomb. Cassidy Nade does stop you from using Swift Step out of a flank, so try keep track of Nade's cooldown, or make sure you have Suzu available when trying to duel him. Finally, we've reached Kiri's ultimate, Kitsune Rush. Rush gives you and your team increased movement speed, attack and healing speed, and reduced cooldowns to whoever is in the gate. Because of this, you can use your Suzu right before casting Rush to guarantee casting it and not getting interrupted by a Doom Punch or something, as well as burst healing your team before rushing in. Just make sure important Suzu abilities are down first. Due to the increased CDR, you get it back up relatively quickly. Rush is also great for flipping fights in your favor as you have increased healing and damage. Be wary of when you use it though, because if you use it too early, the enemy team can simply back off and you'll get 0 value. Ideally, I'd wait till someone on the enemy team has committed to the fight to guarantee some value. This also comes with experience, but try to predict where the fight will break out before casting it. Speaking of casting, Rush does have a short cast time. If you look away too quickly, you might send it in the wrong direction. Aiming Rush is very important because a lot of debris, walls, and even the payload will block you from creating a full gate. On the flip side, if you cast it from high ground, the rush will continue on onto the low ground. I highly recommend doing this, especially if you have heroes that abuse high ground like Soldier or Sojourn. Similarly to Suzu, assess your teammate ult combo possibilities. Some to look out for are Roadhog, Ramatra, Reaper, Soldier, and Genji. In saying this, don't always wait to combo. In Season 9 especially, you want to be farming and using your ult as much as possible. That's all for Kiriko's abilities, but now I want to touch on some general playstyle tips to get the most out of her kit. Kiri is a damage heavy support. While she does a ton of healing, you should never be heal botting, especially with the DPS passive now. This does not mean you are a DPS though, especially if you're struggling to land kunais. Your job as a support is first and foremost to enable your DPS. When it comes to positioning, try to get close to where the fight will take place. Find an off angle and try to get picks. Scoped in targets like Ana, Widow, or Ashe are perfect for this, as they're easier to land the first headshot and almost guarantee a second depending on their reaction time. Being a distraction is also great whether you get kills or not, as long as you're not dying on the flank. Forcing out enemy cooldowns such as Suzu, Nade, or Lamp is more than worth it as long as you get out when you do. With the recent health buffs, this does give you more time to cause havoc in the backline, but always prioritizes your life first. The amount you flank will alter depending on your team comp. If your team is more poke or dive, you can go crazy with flanks, but if your team is more of a brawl comp, then you'll need to prioritize healing and saving Suzu a lot more. On the topic of team comps, take a look at who your second support is. If you have a BAP or a Lifeweaver, then you can risk going out on more flanks. If your second support dies though, dial it back and make sure you're using the key rhythm we spoke about earlier. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions or think I've missed anything, feel free to leave a comment below or ask me on Twitch. If you found this at all helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow Kiri enjoyer. Peace.